Morning. It's Wednesday, June the 13th, 2001. I'm Sidney Porter, and I'm representing the History Committee, and I'm pleased to be able to videotape a person that has contributed a great deal to the health physics profession and our society, the Health Physics Society. Dr. Joseph Sayeg is an old colleague and friend, and Joe, it's my distinct pleasure to have you here and to videotape you for our archives. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Sid, and it is my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Now, let's talk about your early history and your family, Joe. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. I was born in Fresno, California, to my parents who were of Syrian and Lebanese heritage, and I was born on September 22nd, 1925. I was raised in Fresno and went through the high schools, grammar schools and high schools, and also attended my first year at Fresno State College. My chosen profession at that time was engineering. And I just wanted to point out, in terms of my early education, a portrait of my high school picture in which one is so young and inexperienced and thinks that the world is his oyster. So, Sid, go ahead.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about your early schooling, if you will, please, Joe.
My early schooling, as I said, I started my college education at Fresno State College. I went into engineering and spent 1 year, and that was in 1943-44. In 1944, I went up to the University of California at Berkeley and enrolled in the College of Engineering there. After 1 year in the College of Engineering, I transferred over into physics because I took a course under Harvey White, who was a tremendous teacher in the physics department on atomic and nuclear physics. Mm-hmm. And he impressed me so much in terms of the modern physics field that I switched into physics in 1945, and I obtained my Bachelor of Arts degree in physics in 1947.
Yeah.
I took a year off and then went back to graduate school in physics for a year, and the courses were so theoretical that I wanted something more practical, and so I became acquainted with Dr. Cornelius Tobias in the Department of Medical Physics and Biophysics at the University of California at the Donner Laboratories, and I transferred over into biophysics. Mm-hmm. And during the time that I was a graduate student, I worked at the cyclotron under Tobias as a graduate student. And we did quite a bit of work in terms of the high energy particle beams at the University 184-inch cyclotron. I had the privilege of and honor of working with Vic Bond, who was in the Navy at that time in San Francisco, and he was using the 184-inch beam to irradiate his biological samples.
Right. I might add that Victor Bond was, at that point, a world-famous radiobiologist who I think everyone that knew anything about radiobiology looked up to Vic. I know that.
And so it came the time for my thesis assignment, and I did not know exactly what I wanted to do. But Tobias had been working on the effect of high energy beams and low energy radiations on the SC7 haploid yeast. He collaborated with Raymond Zirkle of the University of Chicago on this project, and they had done some real interesting work in terms of the effectiveness of the different radiations in producing cell death in this haploid system of the SC7 yeast. And if I may just get up here and show you the information that was available prior to my thesis in terms of the relative biological effectiveness versus what is known as the LET, or in the early days was known as the rate of energy transfer of the radiation. And the work that was available at that time extended from approximately 200 kVp X-rays to low energy alpha particles from polonium-210. And the RBE went from 1, which was the normalization factor, up to a factor of approximately 2 for the polonium-210 alpha particles. So Tobias, having an Air Force contract to determine the effectiveness of cosmic radiations or radiations in the high LET range, wanted to extend this curve into regions which had not been yet explored. It turned out that at the Berkeley 60-inch cyclotron that they had experimentally developed the so-called 6 times ionized carbon beam, which is initially 120 MeV. And so therefore, it was my problem to develop the instrumentation and physical properties to determine the physical properties of this beam, and then to irradiate the SC7 haploid yeast into regions which had never been explored before. And they wanted to know whether the RBE went up tremendously, whether it went up and stayed constant, or whether it went through a maximum and then decreased. Well, the results that we obtained, and I was working with Ann Burge, who was also in the group at that time with Tobias, to extend the biological effects for the SC7 haploid yeast. And the red part here shows what we had determined in terms of the RBE after we had developed the physical properties of the 6 times ionized beam, that indeed it went through a maximum and came down again in terms of a higher LET value. So this was actually my contribution to the biological effects theory of that time.
Well, we still use that curve today.
Yes.
The shape of that curve today, all these years.
And it has never been refuted in terms of the effects that we had, that other people had used higher energy beams, neon and so forth, to extend the LET range.
Well, Joe, tell me about you just received your PhD, and then at that point you were working at Los Alamos?
No. Well, after I obtained my my PhD, I applied for a position at the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory in terms of the Biomedical Research Group H4, who was it was under the direction of Wright H. Langham. And the thing is that I'd like to show you a picture of Wright, who I consider to be one of the foremost scientists that influenced my career. Unfortunately, he experienced a fatal accident in about 1971, and it was a great loss to the society.
To the profession, too, of
right.
Health physics, certainly, the whole profession. You know, Wright was one of the outstanding health physicists who was very available even to insignificant people like me. I would call Wright with problems, and he would be wonderful in explaining the answers and in leading me to other places where I could get more knowledge. He shared his knowledge so much, and I always admired that in these people that were in the high places that would do that.
He was one of the most remarkable people that I have ever experienced knowing. And I remember one thing that he really left with me in terms of a philosophy.
What's that?
And that is, he realized a person can't be right all the time. And he said, Joe, he says, if you're right 50% of the time, you're doing real well and will be successful in this world. Oh. And also another thing, that it was not beneath him to get in and pitch and do work with his staff and so forth in terms of the menial tasks. And he was always there to help you and not to criticize you, but to help you in terms of pursuing your targets and so forth.
Now, you also work with a number of people that have become legends in our field today. Isn't that where you met Hurst, by the way?
Yes, Samhurst. Well, first of all, I think that the first part of my education, you know, I was a high energy particle physicist in terms of my work at the University of California under Tobias, and then I went to Los Alamos, and they were interested in neutrons and mixed fields. So that's where I learned the ABCs of neutrons and neutron dosimetry, and I had the opportunity to work with Harold Rossi on terms of the atomic bomb tests, Teapot and Plumb Bob.
Tell me about those tests, Joe, because most of the readers will not even know what they are.
Well, they were tests to determine the effectiveness of fission neutron radiations on biological systems to be applied to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki accidents. Harold Rossi developed...
So these were really biomedical tests in a way, weren't they?
Yes. Harold Rossi developed tissue equivalent ionization chambers. Mm-hmm. Well, he designed them, and they were built by Francis Shanka. Shanka was one of the most proficient instrument makers of that period. And the small ionization chambers that were used were put out into the field, exposed, and then brought back and read in the laboratory that was set up in the mouse house, as we termed it at that time.
Why don't you explain to our viewers what the mouse house is?
Well, the mouse house was a little building in which the biomedical research group housed their animals and also their instruments for determining the physical properties of the atomic blasts. Is that enough about the mouse house? Payne Harris was the assistant group leader down there who engineered all the functions of his staff.
Payne is still alive, you know, by the way.
Oh, yes, I understand he's in Washington, D.C.
Yes,
right.
I'm trying to videotape him before too long, God willing.
At a later time, after the atomic bomb tests, Hurst and his group at Oak Ridge were interested in using the Godiva assembly at Los Alamos. Now,
why don't you tell our viewers why it's named Godiva?
Well, Godiva is just nothing more than a bare mass of uranium-235 split into three pieces: a center port, a center portion, and then an upper semi-hemisphere and a lower semi-hemisphere. And it could be operated as a burst facility or as a steady-state reactor. So therefore, we were able to determine the properties of this assembly in terms of dose versus distance. And this was of interest to the Oak Ridge people who wanted to bring in their instruments and compare them to ours. Hearst himself developed what was known as a Hearst proportional counter, which could be used at very low intensities. Whereas he also developed the so-called fission foil system that could be used at very high intensities or burst irradiations. The fission foil system consisted of plutonium foils of plutonium-239, neptunium-237, uranium-238 in terms of the fission foils, and then sulfur-32 as an additional detector for the higher energy neutrons in the fission spectrum.
Weren't some of those wrapped in cadmium, as I remember, to give you a split high and low energy?
Cadmium was generally used for the gold foils that were exposed to the fission assembly, whereby to determine the thermal and epithermal neutrons. So we did a comparison with Hearst in terms of his system. We had the fission foils. We developed our own tissue equivalent ionization chambers, which had different liners in them of tissue equivalent plastic and also carbon, which we used to determine the gamma dose. That is, a tissue equivalent plastic was determined the neutron plus gamma, and the carbon was then chamber was then to determine the gamma only, and subtraction of the two readings gave us, of course, the neutron dose. So during the time that I was at Los Alamos, I did these intercomparisons, and I believe that you will find the results that we have obtained at Los Alamos in terms of NBS Handbook 75, which was published in 1961, and much of this work was done from 1955 to 1960.
And by the way, I might add that as far as I know, this was the first definitive handbook that the NBS put together for mixed gamma neutron measurements.
Yes, it was.
And so it was a unique handbook, and I remember that the excitement when I first saw this, because before then, the textbooks were pretty vague about the problems involved in mixed gamma neutron dosimetry as to how you solve them. And this was the first definitive thing that the practical working health physicists could use in order to try to attempt to define a mixed gamma neutron field. And I remember the excitement when this came out, Joe. You know, and it was a really, I think it's accurate to say it was a landmark document that still stands today because these techniques are still used today. Right. And that's what amazes me, that the work that you did in the 50s in the year 2000 is still valid and still usable. In those early years, in about, as I remember, 1956, you met a very beautiful woman who I think, who I became very fond of later on, because you and she and I had some wonderful times together. You want to tell us about Margaret?
Well, Margaret was an exceptional person, and I met her in 54 and 55, and we were married in 1956, and I just wanted to show you a later picture that we took here, I guess about 10 years ago, to show you this beautiful woman. But unfortunately, during this last year, I lost her, and
very sad.
It was a great loss.
She was a woman that was full of life and enjoyed life and made people feel good that were around her.
Right.
And that's the one thing that I remember about Margaret.
Well,
She made me feel so good, and she was so gracious to everyone, too.
well, she left a legacy of love, and she's still with us.
Of course, and she always will be, too. Absolutely. She was a wonderful person, and I remember, I can just think back on the wonderful trip that we had, but we'll get to that later. I do know that you left LaSalle and went to work for EG&G.
Yes, I left LaSalle because after we got married, I wanted to join. I guess I wanted to join the Honeydew Club. And a little explanation on that was that at the time that I was married in Los Alamos, there was no home ownership. It was all government rentals and so forth. So we wanted to establish our own home. So I accepted a position with EG&G Incorporated in Santa Barbara under Sandy Siegeloff and Henry Barella, who were the so-called chemical dosimetry experts in the trichloroethylene and tetrachloroethylene systems at that time, and they too were out at the atomic bomb tests in terms of exposing their chemical dosimeters. It's very interesting that EG&G is referred to as egg, and what is my name? Sayeg. So therefore, it seemed to be a natural in terms of going to that firm. And I spent a very, very nice several years in Santa Barbara, and had
beautiful place.
Had the opportunity to do some contract work at AFRI,
and that's where we met.
And that's where we met Sid, and also Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And however, during that period there, the pressures of industry and doing contract work, when I had been in an ivory tower at Los Alamos and so forth, was not conducive to my health. So I decided to move on after several years with EG&G, and one of my associates in the Health Physics Society, Neil Wald, offered me a teaching position at the University of Pittsburgh in the Graduate School of Public Health in terms of his department. And that's where I met Alan Brodsky. And the year and a half that I spent there, it was most enjoyable to me because I had found myself in terms of what I really should be doing, and that is teaching students. And however, I got into a little difficulty health-wise in terms of Pittsburgh, as I was the world's best smog meter at that time. And it turned out that I developed a postnasal drip, which gave me a continual sore throat, and that was due to, I understand, to the SO2, the residual SO2 that was still in the air. So I had to find an area that was more conducive to my health, and this is, then I went to and stayed at the University of Kentucky, where I was being interviewed, and stayed down there for about a month or so, and found that I could survive that area. And so I left Pittsburgh after about 18 months, and as I say, I was sorry to leave the area because of the wonderful people there, like Neil Wald and Alan Brodsky. And so, however, I had to consider my health, and we went to Lexington, Kentucky in approximately 1969, where I stayed until I retired in 1993.
Well, tell me about the University of Kentucky and who you were working for and the kinds of things you were doing.
Well, the thing is, I was hired mainly there to establish two programs, one in medical physics and the other in health physics.
By the way, may I interrupt you just
Yeah.
for a second, Joe? A few years earlier, as a matter of fact, it seems to me that you and I sat down together to take a very tough set of board exams.
That was in
Because we took it, remember, we were in the same room anyway, taking it.
1966?
Yeah, I believe it was 65 or 66
Yeah.
it was that we took our boards.
The
And
health physics
I
boards.
amazingly passed, and of course, you aced it probably.
On the contrary, after I got out of there, I thought I had flunked.
Oh, so did I. I was sure I had flunked my boards too, as a matter of fact. But in any case, we both passed our boards in '66, but you, 2 or 3 years later, turned around and took your medical physics boards, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And that was ABR, American Board of Radiology?
American Board of Radiology, right. And I just would like to show a picture here. After that I had gotten to the University of Kentucky and attended one of the Bluegrass health physics meetings, and here we have Walter Snyder presenting my certificate to me. So now to continue about the programs at the University of Kentucky. I was in the Department of Radiology in the medical school, and there was a division of radiation therapy at that time, for which I was assigned under Dr. Robert Greenlaw, who was the therapist at that time. And so therefore he was interested in setting up these programs. Now John Calkins, who was in the department at that time, had written a proposal which was accepted by the university to establish these programs. So indeed we did establish them. We did not get very many students initially, but I was able to obtain several AEC fellowships in health physics at that time to help fund the students' education.
Can you tell me about your students a little bit?
Well, the students were mainly of a medical orientation, and many of them went into the medical physics field. Because the reason we got the AEC fellowships was that it was medical health physics that they were interested in. And so we had about 5 or 6 students in health physics, with the rest of them in medical physics. But again, the ones in medical physics were well versed in the medical health physics area. So I was the program director until my retirement from, let's see, we started about 1971 with the program to 1991 or thereabouts. I was a program director, and we had done very well in terms of our educational activities. I got some help in terms of an assistant. Dr. Ralph Christensen from the University of California and also from Stanford University came with our group in about 1973 or 74, and he helped tremendously in terms of setting up the program. He is now chairman of the Department of Radiation Science after I retired. The other thing that we did of interest to the Health Physics Society, which gave a great deal of prestige to the university, was to establish the Wright H. Langham Memorial Lectures.
Now, who established those?
I established them in terms of approximately 1971, 72. You see, Wright was tragically killed in 1971 or 72, and I got
Airplane accident, as I remember.
Yes, it was an airplane accident going from Albuquerque, taking off from Albuquerque, and the luggage door of the small airplane opened and actually injured a propeller, and therefore the plane was not maneuverable, and the pilot tried to come back to the airport and couldn't make it. And I believe there were 7 scientists besides Wright, approximately 7 well-known Los Alamos scientists that were killed in that accident.
Tragic.
And so after I got to the University of Kentucky, I established this lectureship, and it was funded by the university. And some of the people that we had had for this lectureship were K.Z. Morgan, J. Newell Stannard, Eugene Sanger, Clarence Lushbaugh, Ed Webster, Bill Hendee, Jim Kariakis, Chester Richmond, Herb Parker, John Auxier, Warren Sinclair, Harold Rossi, Victor Bond, Alan Brodsky, Lawrence and Taylor, Herb Addix, and Neil Wald. And I had quite a bit of contact with all of these people prior to my going to the University of Kentucky.
Well, that's an amazing group of people.
And it was very, very enjoyable. And I have all these tapes and also their photographs presenting the lecture and so forth. But
you have the actual tapes of the lectures?
Yes, I do.
Well, I might add that the society would love to add those to their archives, if that would be a reasonable thing to do.
I'll look them up, and I'd be glad to donate them, because these historical aspects of a scientist should be preserved after the scientist passes on, and so therefore I would be delighted to donate them to the university.
Thank you, Joe. That's awfully nice. Now, would you like to kind of look back over your career and tell me where you sort of think the profession of health physics is going, and maybe give the younger professionals coming into the field some ideas of what you think that they ought to be doing and what they should be looking for?
Well, let me say that I'll first give you some historical aspects of my activities with the Health Physics Society. I was chairman of the history committee way back in the 70s. But my main contributions to the Health Physics Society was working on the American Board of Health Physics on Part 1, and in terms of determining new questions for the Part 1 examination.
I happen to know from personal experience that you were a real taskmaster, too.
Well, yes. I guess that's one of my failures.
Not a failure at all.
In a sense,
respected you for it.
In a sense, I may have been too hard on my students, and also too hard on my expectations of a student. And many of my fellow colleagues said, "Oh, that question, they'll never get it. It shouldn't be included." But I thought maybe that for those that were gifted, it might be, but that was not the point of the examination. The point of the examination was to reach the majority of students, not the few.
Now, you worked for many years, as I remember, on the Part 1 exam.
Yes.
Which was, by the way, a vast amount of work.
Oh, yes.
The hours that were put in by you had to be tremendous.
In fact, I think that I was chairman of that Part 1 subgroup, or whatever you want to call it, for approximately 2 years. And the other activity that I had with the Health Physics Society, of course, is, let me show it here.
Oh, yes.
I became a cameraholic. And this is my, my addiction in terms of trying to preserve the history of the Health Physics Society. And so therefore, I have enjoyed taking the pictures of the society. I first started out in slides, of which now I have provided you with 3 binders, something like 1,800 slides. And I also provided some prints and so forth from about, slides from about 1966 to 1986, and then prints from 1986 to 1990. And so that, those have been my major activities to the Health Physics Society. And I had the pleasure of substituting for Gail McGinnis in terms of this meeting, in terms of the Good Times Night Out, for which I took a few exposures.
I might add that several people came up to me and said, you know, it sure is good to see Joe Sayeg back taking pictures again. I wanted to share that with you.
Well, thank you very much. Several other people did come up and thank me for taking the pictures, and I says, well, it's something that I really enjoy, and I've always enjoyed it, and I will continue to enjoy it.
You know, as far as the archival heritage of the Health Physics Society, your 22 or 23 years worth of pictures there are a big part. And I just might add that we've just recently started to put these on CD, to digitize them, put them on CD. And a lot of these will be used in our 50th anniversary publication. And it's wonderful to have this heritage to be able to draw on for the society. So not only have you enriched the professional life of health physicists, but you've also very much enriched our history and our archives. So it's interesting that you were on the history committee so many years ago,
yeah,
and then understood how important it was to preserve that heritage, because you certainly have done that.
Well, not to be competitive in terms of another society, I have done the same thing for the American Association of Physicists in Medicine. I was there a photographer for something like 1970 to, again, the same period, to about 1991. And so therefore I'm preparing an album for them in terms of the slides that I took at the early, during the early days. And it has really been enjoyable going through these slides and seeing the people that I had worked with. And I just want to say, oh, by the way, how's our time running?
We're in good shape.
Oh, we're in good shape. That in terms of my my professional work, I would like to say that I had worked with some of the leading people in terms of the early years, such as Cornelius Tobias, Wright Langham, Harold Rossi, and so forth. That people don't get the opportunity that I'm aware of, and in getting so many of these people the honor to work with these people.
Well, you were, truly in the early golden age of health physics there.
That's right.
And you've left your mark in terms of the publications. When you were at AFRI, you did a number of landmark publications on the characterization of that pulsed reactor, which still stand today as being probably some of the best dosimetry work that's ever been done in neutron gamma measurements. And that's the thing that that impressed so many people at AFRI, was the work and the teaching that you did there. You were a natural teacher, and you held classes at AFRI. I remember that, and we all look forward to those classes. One of my high points in an 8-year career there were taking your classes, Joe. I just love that. It was so enriching for everybody. And as you remember, people would come down from the Bureau of Standards to take those classes. They were just wonderful classes. Earlier, we didn't get this handsome picture of this young man. I think we might have missed that when we were talking about, about your earlier days. So I just wanted to re-show it again. And it's amazing that this gentleman who's in his latter years is still so handsome.
Well, thank you.
And still,
thank you.
And still going so well. And I'd like to close this by saying that it has been one of the most enriching things in my professional career to have known you and to have learned from you, and to be able to leave this legacy to our archives where we have a glimpse, a snapshot of your long and very productive career. So, Joe, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Sid, and it was a pleasure to be here, and I hope that this videotaping will serve as a contribution to the Health Physics Society.
Absolutely. Okay. For those of you that have been around the Health Physics Society for a few years, I just wanted to show Joe, as he has always looked with the camera around his neck here, because, Joe, there are a lot of people that might not recognize you without that, you know.
That's right.
And it's so good seeing you again. It really is. It's been wonderful.
It has been, Sid. It has.
It's been good. And so, you know, we're gonna do this a few more times, or a number more times. I hope that you'll be able to make some of the meetings, especially ones that are closer to you.
Here's Costa.